Let's return now to 1997 for some third round action at the Great Lakes Open, taped long ago by our pal Rick Allen.
Leading the tournament was then 7-time world champion Ken Climo. He's got a dozen world titles now. Next came former amateur world champion Scott Martin, followed by long-throwing Scott Stokely. Rounding out the foursome was Southern Dynamo Brad Hammock. Here on hole 1 of the original course, we'll pick up the action as Brad makes his bid for a deuce. Notice how the right side of the fairway has filled out through the years as we look at the same view from today. Nature was helped a bit here with some planting by the Ann Arbor Club. Getting their rounds off to a good start, both Scotts, Stokely and Martin, will go on to make their deuce putts. You can see pretty clearly how the rough has developed through the years in this view. The Scotts stayed on form for the second hole. Notice that Scott Martin can play a hyzer line off the tee. Scott Stokely throws a backhand out to the right, which comes to rest past the basket. KC's drive draws our attention to a shrub on the edge of the fairway, up by the amateur tee pad. Fast forward 12 years, that modest bush, an invasive species called the Russian olive, dominates the area. And over on the left side, the hyzer line favored by the lefty just doesn't exist. Time has allowed some volunteers to pop up on the right side, and the club has done some planting to help out as well. This small stand of trees on the left side remains, although other areas of the course have lost similar stands. Again, both Stokely and Martin card deuces. From this angle, the basket on the third hole can't be seen. This is the kind of hole that drives mere mortals nuts. These guys are not your everyday golfers, however. Really old-timers around here can remember a huge tree 75 or so feet off the tee, which used to really raise the pucker factor. 12 years has not made this tee shot any easier. But further down the fairway is where the biggest changes are. These Russian olives were no factor back in the day, but now they define the right edge. Over on the opposing side, several plantings by the club effectively define the fairway's left edge. On this day, Stokely makes it 3 for 3 before Ken Climo and Brad Hammock finally climb aboard the birdie train. The fourth hole is the first hole where we begin to see large trees, which were lost through the years. Mr. Stokely's drive gets knocked down by a tree on the left side. Brad Hammock goes with the roller and avoids such concerns. The changes through the years here are stunning. Of the major trees, only the maple on the right survives. The others were among the last elms in this area. In their place, large ash trees were added in advance of the 2000 Worlds. All of the ashes subsequently croaked as well, thanks to the invasive emerald ash borer. Second and third waves of planting by the club have helped rejuvenate the left side. Brad Hammock provides a great putting highlight here, while the other three players made par threes. Embarking on the 6-hole alphabet loop, Brad has honors as the players drive on hole A, and he goes the direct route down the heart of the fairway. Stokely and Climo both opt for a big hyzer shot around these trees. And to illustrate just how subtle some changes are, this branch here helped create a low ceiling back in '97, but a few years later it came down and the hole was instantly more open down the middle. Here's how the tee shot looks today. Few, if any, go the outside route nowadays. Here's the left side of the hole today, near the basket. This putt was a lot easier before these olives matured. And over on the right, a few plantings were added to make the putt from where KC landed a bit more of a challenge. Scott Martin found the fairway, but his putter lets him down. Brad rolls along though, carding his third straight birdie. Our 4 featured players take a nice variety of routes on their way to the basket on the next hole. If we showed this footage to local golfers, a lot of them might not recognize a hole they play frequently. This is one where the designed hole bears almost no resemblance to the present day hole. Chalk it up to elm disease and the ash borer, but the first half of this hole was almost wiped clean only a few years into the new century. For the 2000 Worlds, we planted a large cedar here, but it never did well and was gone after a few years. Here's the view from the tee pad players see today. While the hole has withered on this end, down at the business end there are changes in the other direction. Note the small bushes in the area while Scott Stokely reminds us he was a great putter, as well as a cannon off the tee. There's also a glimpse of a maple on the left side as Brad notches his 4th in a row. KC had a more routine deuce. The pin position on this hole has since been moved. A boulder now sits where the basket had been. By moving the basket back just a few feet, the maples, which now nearly touch in the center of the fairway, come into play more prominently. And the shrubs, which weren't even in Stokely's way, are now daunting. Here's the view from behind the new basket position. It was a star frame for our boys here on Hole C as they take a variety of routes, but all get pretty close to the basket, tucked in behind the central cedar. The wide right hyzer route, favored by KC, is still an option today, albeit a bit tougher perhaps. At the rate these guys are deucing, the guys behind them are going to have a hard time catching up. Again, we can spot areas of contrasting growth and decline. The now substantial bushes along the right side are creeping towards the fairway, and these volunteers along the left side are beginning to add some challenge. This boulder in the fairway is new, but may come too late to save the base of this cedar from golfer-caused ruination. We enjoyed watching Scott Stokely effortlessly overthrow this hole by a good 75 feet. But KC's drive, which followed, was a pure park job, which came to rest 6 or so feet from the hole. This hole has seen less change than just about any other out here, from our brief survey at least. There's Scott back there where no one ever goes, with a nice bid for birdie nonetheless. We've planted a cedar to help make up for the loss of one of the guard trees near the basket. Brad Hammock's birdie train had stalled, and he was looking at this for a par 3. Nicely done. At 255 feet, hole E is pretty much a chip shot for these guys, and they'll go on to record yet another star frame. Leave it to Scott Stokely to find an entertaining route. It's a pretty good bet. Most players never consider a line like this, but if you've got it, why not flaunt it? And the results just speak for themselves. Not to be outdone, Scott Martin went hunting for the basket. The tree he hit finally fell a few weeks ago, leaving the direct route more wide open than ever. Bushes flanking the tee pad now make Stokely's wide swinger to the left a little trickier. Closer to the basket, the club has planted a few items which will spice things up eventually. Once players of this caliber get into this range, the deuces are sure to follow. It was the Scott and Scott show on hole F when this group came through. This nearly featureless hole was targeted early on by the club for redevelopment. The long dead elm in the fairway would have to be removed soon for safety. Today, while not yet a particularly demanding hole, this one can at least present a few challenges. The trees that have been added through the years get their fair share of attention from players, and their impact grows a bit every year. The next hole returns us to the original 18-hole layout. This one is another interesting story of devastation. Just about all of the trees in the fairway were elms and were already on their way out in 1997. The Ann Arbor Club planted replacement trees for Worlds 2000, which were done in by the ash borer a few years later. By coincidence, at the base of those now dead transplanted ash trees grew small cedars. Today, those cedars, and a variety of other plantings installed by the club, make up a successful effort at bringing some challenge back to this fairway. The last portion of the fairway remains open today, as it was back in the day when Ken Climo had only 7 world championships, and our videographer discovered his freeze frame feature. Scott made a nice putt as well. These guys are good. We now jump ahead to the 300-foot 10th. Lefty Scott Martin has emerged with honors from a series of wooded holes. This distance is right in the wheelhouse for this caliber of player, and these guys don't disappoint. Stokely switches to his forehand for this one, while the other righties opt for backhand shots. Once again, all 4 players are in gear and playing well. As we transition to the current view, the starkest change has to be the rough on the edges of the fairway. The height of the Russian olive and honeysuckle bushes make for a far more challenging drive, and the loss of a major tree on the right side is somewhat counterbalanced by growth of other trees in the same area. Up closer to the basket, this cedar stops more and more shots every year. KC has a bit of a putt to secure his deuce, while the other 3 players are all just a few feet away from the pin. Nice shooting, gentlemen. Most of us struggle to make a few nice shots each round, but these guys make it look easy. We tried to get in touch with Scott Stokely to find out what he's been up to lately, but had no luck. Rumor has it he's out in Colorado, but no longer playing competitively. The last hole in our trip around Hudson Mills via the time machine is the 12th. A fitting place to end, since this was the site of our most recent arboreal disaster. There's a pretty gnarly seasonal pond over on the right, so players tend to favor lines straight up the middle or to the left side when it's wet. Being heavily wooded, the light on this hole was often low, even on a sunny day. The contrast with the same view 12 years later is stark. A few weeks ago, a Michigan Department of Natural Resources crew came through and felled dozens of dead and decaying trees, each cut making the hole a bit easier. But the changes bring the area more sun, and the club will add some additional plantings. And as time moves along, out of this mess, nature will find even more devious ways to thwart disc golfers. We hope you enjoyed this trip through time. It was certainly a treat to see some familiar faces out of the past. Perhaps in a future episode, we'll dig out our footage of the final 9 for this tournament. Until then, so long from 1997.
In a previous episode, we watched early round action from last year's Amateur National Championship. We return now to the fabled toboggan course for final round play.
For the lead card on the final round of the 2010 United States Amateur Disc Golf Championships. Teeing off first and representing Canada, Dr. Robert Martinek. From California, Lee Swenson. From Ohio, Ricky Wysocki. And the current leader of the event from North Carolina, David Wiggins, Jr.
I'm Joe Wander, and on behalf of PDGA Media, welcome to the PDGA's online coverage of the 2010 United States Amateur Disc Golf Championship. This is the third in our 3-part series. Today we'll follow the top cards around the toboggan course and see who's crowned the 2010 United States Amateur Disc Golf Champion. Nice par to start off for Leaf. No change after 1 here on the toboggan course. Now we go to the par 5 second. Yesterday, David Wiggins Jr. made an eagle 3 after putting his second shot within the 10-meter circle. That's how you move ahead on a field like this. All right, ladies and gentlemen, is a crush. Rob taking the conservative route here. He's going to make this a 3-shot hole, like most mortals. Amateurs across the country will be relieved to know that in a couple of short weeks, after another tournament in Charlotte and the Amateur World Championship in Ohio, we can expect to see David Wiggins Jr. become a professional disc golfer. It was Richard Wysocki with a par 5 on the second. Birdie 4s for the other 3 players on the lead card. Through 2 holes here in the final round, David Wiggins has stretched his lead to 4 over Richard Wysocki. One of the stories at this year's Amateur National Championships has to be age. Let's look just at our top card here. Our leader, David Wiggins Jr., is just 15 himself. Richard Wysocki and Leif Swenson are both 17. Add all three of those together and you come up with Robert Martinek's age. It's a beautiful afternoon here at Kensington Metro Park in Milford, Michigan for the final round of the 2010 AM Nationals. Overcast skies, maybe a little threat of rain, but nothing's coming down but maybe the occasional sprinkle. Temperatures in the upper 70s. The wind has been variable, gusty at times, but not a real concern for players today. The concern on most everybody's mind, who's anywhere near the top of the charts, is David Wiggins Jr. And David has shown no real signs of coming back towards the field here. He may be an amateur, but he's getting the pro kicks today. In fact, over the course of the first few holes, he extended his lead to 6 throws and hasn't really slowed down. So David Wiggins dropped a stroke on the previous hole, so the lead is probably 5 or so, with 8 holes to play. Nice little bounce back for David Wiggins Jr. In case anybody thought he was going anywhere. Here's a gallery waiting to watch these guys boom some drives up the uphill 13th. Crowd seems to like that. The final round here at AM Nationals is fast drawing to a close. Every time we get an update, we find David Wiggins has enlarged his lead a little bit and crept closer to the title. There is no stopping young David Wiggins today. Another birdie here on 17. Victory lap here for David Wiggins Jr. Been around of spit outs for Richard. Big finish for Richard Wysocki to finish the tournament strong. All 4 of our top card contenders played well, unfortunately, unless David was going to start coming back towards the field. There would be no beating him today. There's Leif finishing out, nice par.
We're going to give the 8th place trophy to a man from Davenport, Iowa, Ben Calloway. Taking 7th place from Indiana, Eric Ford. And the top finishers from Michigan in 6th place, Michael Rabin. Now, here we go. We have now the big, impressive, cool trophies, which have the American Statue of Liberty on it, which will be especially important to this next competitor, seeing as he lives in Canada. We don't often have medical doctors coming in and schooling the field, but from Canada, Dr. Robert Martinet. Wow, the one person in the top 4 that didn't start in the top 4 at the beginning of the day, that fought his way into the top 4 from the second card by shooting a great final round, 55, that's pretty darn solid. From North Carolina, Walton Satcher. Time for second. Taking the 3rd place trophy from California, Leif Swenson. from Medina, Ohio, Ricky Wysocki. From North Carolina, coming all the way up here to beat up on this course and this tournament and these competitors, David Wiggins Jr.
John. John Baldwin. Okay, ready? Well, you're expecting to make those after a while. Well done. Nice spot for Barry Schultz. Good two. That's two for John Baldwin. There we go. Star frame. That's what you expect out of the lead group.